to the analysis features and then have to stop in the middle. So let's talk about a little more about some of the display options here. And I want to talk about expressions very quickly, and then a little bit about views, because that just affects what you can see. And we'll call it a day. So maybe an hour. So we'll see how we do. And then we'll talk about the analysis features and a little bit of troubleshooting tomorrow, and open it up for any kind of questions that you might have, such as installation options and the deeper technical questions. So we can look at some of the connection things, OPC, filters, mapping files, etc. At the end. Okay, so we had been talking about reports, and sometimes you don't want to just see a report. You want to see a report that shows you a little bit more of the analysis of what's going on. And we have something called context data that we can use to filter reports. So context data is has to be added in. Context data is not time series. It's something like batch. So if we're working on, products, you can see the context data that we have here. We have a product, it's wine, water, tea, soda, seltzer, right? So a bottling plant is putting something into bottles, and each batch has its own characteristics. So there may be an operator. So we have here operator 5. The pagination here is a little different. So at the top of the screen, we still got operator 5. Now we've got operator 4. I think I saw an operator 1. And we have some other types of context data that can be used for something like Monday, right? So we can say, I only want to see something on Mondays. So we have a couple of different options here. And at the very end, this batch, we have batch values. I just jumped to the end of the context data. So maybe a batch, 2723, batch 2, batch, line 2, batch 16, line 1, batch 3. And then we can also, here's some different products, we can put in context data for things like days. Like we can say, I want to see something for Tuesdays. I want to see something for the first week of the year, or something like that. So to put in this data, we actually would say add context data, and then select where we want it to go. So I want to have maybe a new product, and I'm going to call this product, I don't know, chocolate milk. I don't think you can have a space. And so I'm going to be producing chocolate milk, and I'll put a start time and an end time. But then I have to identify which of the connections it applies to. So if I'm going to be, I'm going to be doing chocolate milk on the 15th of the month from, 12 noon to 5 o'clock. And then which of the connections will it impact? So it might impact the shrink wrap. It might impact the, the air compressor. I don't know. So that's how I have to add in the context data. If you're only adding in a couple of pieces, that's okay. It's actually easier to create an input file that lists all of them. For instance, if I'm going to have chocolate milk the first day of every month, or from 1 to 4 every day, I can specify continuous or something like that. But what that does is it gives me a list of different things that I can use to filter the data. And we have that in some of these displays. So a couple of different things to look at. So we had looked at the air compressor, for instance. I'm going to display this report again. This one is a fairly generic report. We've got the air compressor, what's the PSI, the sum of the PSI, it's just a different type of display. But notice over here on the right-hand side, it says, what's the air compressor where the product is water? So the air compressor was working the whole time, but I can say, only show me that metric if the product being produced is water. Or I could do it by wine, or I could do it by another filter of some sort. Now, down underneath that, it's a slightly different. We've said, show me water, but display by batch. So I did water on line 2, batch 3. I did water on line 2, batch 3 again. Here's the PSI, another one. And so anytime I had this batch, that's what's included here in the display. So I can limit what's being included. Now there's another way that I can do this. And over on the top, instead of going back to the list of reports, I've got just a shortcut here to go to another report in this group. And the packing line, the strapper RPM display from the packing line has a couple of other types of information. A display, in this case, it's done by Thursdays. So I have the entire line view at the top for the time of last week, right, between February 9th and February 16th. And beneath that, these groups are by day. So you can see I'm having the max RPM grouped by Mondays. And I'm going to pop out this report so we can look at it a little more closely. He didn't group this. This is not what I expected. I expected to see just Mondays on this report. So a Monday would be whatever Monday was. Monday was the 13th. And so I can group it that way. I can also group it by the previous weeks. And this is what you see here. So I'm active down at the bottom. In this display, max RPM grouped by previous weeks. Notice I don't have any display on the weekends. I only have display during the weekdays. So I have Monday through Friday, and then I have nothing when there's not any activity on the weekends. Okay. So how do I know, how do I create that report? Well, there's a couple of ways that I can do that. And so what I want to do is go back and look at some of these charts. So let's start with the air compressor. So we had the air compressor where we were only looking at the data on the times that we were producing wine. How do I know, first of all, where that chart is? Well, that's easy enough. If we go back to the list, remember, we know the name of the report, and the report is going to be based on a template. So the template is packing line air compressor. Let's go back and look at that template. Here's packing line air compressor. So I'm going to take a look at that chart. Okay, so here's the chart. And it's air compressor where product is water. And beneath it, we have air compressor where product is water, display by batch. So let's go look at those charts and see how they're created. So we have IIoT, they were somewhere in the middle, air compressor where product is water, right? So here's my report. And how did I create it? to say, just show it to me where the product is water. Remember, that was our context data that said, I have different products. Okay, let's start with the air compressor. We have an air compressor chart, and it just says, show me batch, product, and PSI. Now, PSI is the metric. All that does is show me the metrics. When I say where the product is water, I have to add a little bit of configuration. So I'm going to start with the same three metrics in this chart, PSI, batch, and product, and I got that from the air compressor. And when I display that, here's PSI, but where did batch come from? That's context data. So once I added in that context data saying I've got multiple products and they're wine and tea and water, I can add that to the chart. So that's where batch and product come from. The advanced settings are where I can create conditions for display and display options. So in this chart, we said, show me, display this chart. So the real time series metric is PSI, where product contains water. So I had to tell EDM in the chart description that I'm going to use this product metric. Remember, we can throw in batch and not use it. That's okay. But where product contains water. So I went from displaying the PSI values for the entire week of the report to only displaying it where the product is equal to water. And then one step further, where the product is water, group by batch. So there's display by and group by. So let's edit that report and take a look at these settings. So now I've got the same metrics here, and I've said I only want to know where we're doing water, but display by batch. Okay, so I had multiple batches. You recall, sometimes I'm doing, batch 1 is maybe from 10 to 11 o'clock in the morning. Batch 2 might be later on. But display by and group by allow me to do something a little bit different in terms of how I'm going to display that data. So let's go back and look at this report again. So here's my air compressor. And I had the air compressor was busy the whole time, but it was we were only doing water at this one little bit of time on the 8th, it was the 8th or the 9th, from 1909 until 2000 hours the next day. Now, also, it looks like we were doing water a few times. So if we have multiple batches and we say display by, what that tells us is each time we created wine, notice we're starting at 0. It took us 6 hours. And it looks like every time the production worked the same way. This option for display by, what it allows us to do is take that time series data, but add it on top of each other. So imagine you wanted to see what your Mondays look like. And I can say PSI or any other metric that I've saved for a month or a week or a year. I can say, based on Mondays, show me what a Monday looks like. And every Monday starts at midnight and goes to midnight. So what the display by option does is it just lays them on top of each other so that you can compare them. We can see here, every time we did water, it looks like the PSI was very consistent, right? For that 6 hours that it took us to produce the water. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's different, and we wanted to see why it was different the second Monday of the month compared to the other Mondays. So that's what this display by option allows us to do. And we actually have that in a couple of these other displays. Okay, so we've got all of our different juice, seltzer, soda, beer here for the counts, right? So how many did we actually produce? And then we've got another status report here, the one that we looked at before, where it's showing us some of these display by and group by as well. Okay, so different time ranges, different metrics, and what's going on within them. So questions so far. We can go through and create one of those. I'll just have to run through it. It's been a while since I've actually done it. So we can do that maybe first thing tomorrow. Okay, we talked about expressions. And one of the things with expressions is that we're creating a new metric. So why would we need to do that? Sometimes it's just a display issue. And sometimes it's a matter of adding values together, maybe for the difference between different things. So I like this display here, the HVAC, because it's got a temperature metric. And we're going to use that to create one of our expressions. So what is this temperature displayed in, right? It's either going to be in Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit. And we maybe don't want to see it that way, right? Maybe we want to see it, we've got it in, this is 70 in the 70s, so probably this is being displayed in Fahrenheit degrees. Maybe we want to see it in Celsius or vice versa. So an easy way to figure out how to convert them is to just look it up. But what we can do is we can create an expression to do that for us. I actually know how to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit easier, so that's what we're going to do. Under the Alerts tab, we have expressions. And there are a lot of expressions here. You can see there's the list that come by default with the product. And most of them are based on operating system monitoring. But we can create an expression to do pretty much anything. So let's look at our, I think it was under the air compressor, if I'm not wrong. We had our air compressor metrics. Oh, I was wrong. So let's go back. I'm going to pick a different display. Okay, when in doubt, where is the metric that we want for, where's our display? You would think I would write this down. Okay, the status is the one that had the pie charts. No. Okay, so we want the HVAC, air quality, air temperature. Alerts. Let's expressions, add expression. We don't have one called HVAC. Oh, I thought we did. There we go. So we have air temperature. We're going to select that metric. And what that does is it puts the metric into this little box over here. So we have a temperature metric, and we're going to assume that it's in Celsius, but now we want to turn it into Fahrenheit. And there is an algorithm to do that, which is basically take the value in Celsius, which is in air temp, and multiply it by 9, and then take that whole thing, put that in parentheses. So we have our temperature in Celsius. We're going to multiply it by 9, and then we're going to divide the whole thing by 5, right? If you're going back to algebra. And then the whole product from that, we add 32. We're going to say plus 32. So this is our conversion. So we had, like I said, we had a metric, and we want to convert it to something else. There is a check syntax button. What EDM does is he doesn't know what the values are, but he knows the syntax of your expression is either good or bad. And I clicked check syntax. He did not give me an error, so I'm going to assume it's okay. And we're going to save the expression. Now, if I just wanted to rename a metric, like here, I have air temp, and I don't know what that is. Well, I'm going to call that temperature in Celsius. All I'm doing really is renaming it. So when I select this temp in Celsius to display, basically what EDM is doing is he's just taking the value of this metric. And I'm going to save that metric and close this dialog box. So my two expressions are now added to the list. One of them is just take the value of air temp and show it to me with a different name. The other is take the value of air temp and actually manipulate it, do the expression, come up with a new value, and I'm calling that temperature in Fahrenheit. You can see a lot of these metrics are doing things like up here, we have memory percent used. If I have the memory percent free, it's a percentage, so it's based on 100. So if I have 100 minus memory free, gives me memory in use. So some of them are very straightforward as well. Okay, so what does this do for me? Back in my metric list, now the expressions are added to the metric list because air temp is in this list of metrics, so EDM can resolve this. And so I can add these to any chart that I want and show the chart. So now you can see I've got the temperature in Fahrenheit, the temperature in Celsius. So that's a pretty straightforward example, but it does show you I can create new metrics to manipulate, and I could even use an expression within another expression, right? So if I want to just have the difference between two values, it's value A minus value B, right? And then I would call that maybe difference in temperature, difference in humidity, something like that. So it's very easy to create new expressions based on the values that you already have. Okay. In this case, it was just a simple, I have it in one measure and I want to display it in a different one. Or I don't like the name that was already there, so I'm going to call it something else. Okay, so that was our temperature C example. So just a very quick overview of expressions, but you can see in the examples here, some of them really do get fairly complicated. The ones that were already out there are based, again, on operating system monitoring, but it applies anywhere, right? Because EDM sees values, and if it's a value, EDM can manipulate it. Now, these values are not stored in the database, right? So when we go back and look at the metric list, the metrics are actually collected and stored. So if we're monitoring an HVAC system, we probably are getting this data from either an S&MP or a connection from a file, where we have a file connection that's dropping the values in. But I'm only receiving these 4 metrics. The expressions are created at runtime. When I reference the environment data source, EDM basically goes, oh, let me check and see if any of these expressions resolve, which means your expression includes a metric name that's in the list, so I can include it as an available value for you to chart. So it's really that simple. Sometimes it takes a couple of tries to get the expression to show you exactly what you want, but it really is that simple. Okay, one more thing I wanted to show you was the views, and we haven't seen a lot of them. We haven't used a lot of them, but a view is basically what you see on the left-hand side, and this is really more usability than anything else. If I look, for instance, at my visualization here, you can see now I have a lot of reports, but I'm filtering the way that they're displayed. So the All Reports view shows me all of the reports that have actually been created in this instance of EDM. This is not a really long list. A lot of people, that have been using EDM for a long time will have several pages of reports. You can see here's the one that we just created this morning, Debbie's report. There are a few here from the packing line. There are some down here that was an aquaculture fish farming example. So how can I display just the ones that I actually want to look at? And so I create a view. The Manage Views allows me to do that. So first, take a look at the columns here. I have the name of the report, and then I have the title if one was configured. Some of them don't have reports. The template that it's based on, description if there is one, the time reference. Okay, and then we actually had a schedule for one, and we'll go back and look at that in a second. The packing line reports display is a little bit different. I have more columns in a different order. For instance, the name is not on the left-hand side, the description is. And there's an empty column here because none of these are based on a chart, they're all based on a template. What does that view description look like? When I click Manage Views, EDM takes me to the views for the page that I was looking at. So we were looking at the reports page, and we have multiple views that were available. When you right-click, you have the option to create a new one or to copy the existing one, but let's just edit this. We have several fields that are available, and then we have conditions. Now, in this case, the conditions are empty because we want to see all of the reports, but the columns basically says include these columns in the view in the order specified. Compare that to the packing line view where we had many more columns and they were in a different order. Okay, so now I look at this and I'm like, you know what? I really don't need this chart column because it was empty, so I'm going to take it out. The conditions tell us if the name has the word packaging in it or it has the word air in it included in the display. any of the fields in the display can be used for a condition. For instance, I can say, show me any of them where the template, is packing line or something like that. Okay. And so when I save it, now I've actually changed this view. And when we go back to the reports listing, you see my chart column is gone. Okay, so it's that easy to rearrange and what you're seeing. The idea, though, is that you can create groups of connections or groups of reports or charts so that you don't have to go through pages and pages every time you want to go in and edit something. You remember our charts display, there were quite a few of them here. Okay, so we can actually create, let's go into Manage Views, all of the charts that we were using. Okay, let's create a new view, and we'll call it Packing Line. If you remember, I'm going to add everything in here. All of those charts had the name that started with IIoT. I'm just going to say contains. I can say starts with, but they contain IIoT. So when I save that and go back to my charts display, okay, back to charts. Here's the view that I just created, and it only contains any chart where the name contains IIoT. So here's the name column in the middle. If I decide I actually, I really don't need some of this other stuff, I go in, I edit. Okay, the description was there. I really want the name to be first. Don't really need the description, didn't need the keywords. So let's save that again. And when we go back to our charts listing, and here's my list, packing lines, the last one I was looking at. And so EDM shows me that information. Okay, so just as an aside, all of our views are public here, but we can create a private view. And that's based on users, where you can say, for instance, only allow user John and Jack to see a particular view. So Zach is reminding me to stop and ask for questions. Okay. There was something. Oh, we wanted to go back and look at the schedule report. And actually, we'll be able to call it a day quickly today, mostly because I'm talking fast and not a lot of questions. So that's good. So looking under the reports, remember we had that saved report and Debbie's report. Let's look at it again. And I just had these couple of metrics in here. And I said to save the report. Let's look at the configuration. Save the report to PDF at 11:30 every morning. So where that saved is under the Saved Reports tab. So it goes by the report name. And when I look in here, I have 11:30 today. I can display this report or download it. It depends on the browser, really. Some will display it, some download it automatically. And I'm going to go ahead and open it. So you can see it basically just created the report that I had. One chart that was included in this report definition. And again, I can I can send it attached to an email, or I can do whatever I want with it. When we come back tomorrow, we'll see that tomorrow there will be another copy of the report. This one is yesterday. Yesterday was the 15th. Tomorrow when we come in, remember our report definition says last full day. So tomorrow's report will be for Thursday. And that's a really powerful tool, especially for sending management reports or things like that. We actually have a customer that's a telephone company, and their daily report is the summary of the number of phone calls the previous day. It's quite interesting. You see that there's a spike at 10 o'clock in the morning and another spike at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, we think that's because a lot of people schedule meetings at those 2 times of the day more than the other times. So it's really kind of interesting what you can find out just by looking at these daily and weekly reports. What else might affect the way that your report looks? Notice when we display this report, the data is summarized by 5 minutes. But the data is not necessarily collected at 5 minutes. When I drill into a report, okay, notice EDM now is displaying this data at 30 seconds when I drilled in. Okay, why is that? It's because EDM wants to display the data in a way that you can more easily see, right? So if you had too many data points, it would be harder to understand, I guess is the word that I want. So he summarizes it for you automatically. Now there is a setting, remember we talked about these system settings very briefly this morning. There's a chart setting and it's max intervals per chart. What that means is how many data points can I include along the x-axis of the chart? So how many time points can I include? And by default, we said 1,500. Now there are 1,440 minutes in a day. My data was at a 30-second interval, which means I actually have 2,880 data points in a day. So it exceeds this setting. I can go in and change this. Maybe I'll make it 5,000. And now when I go back to display my report, EDM says, oh, you notice it looks a little different because I allowed that many data points, and now EDM can actually display the data at the 30-second interval. Now, I may or may not want him to actually do that. But either way, you can always drill in from the 5-minute data into the 30-second data. Okay, and I'm going to go back and set this back to where it was just because other people use this instance of EDM. So the default is 1,500. There are also other settings, and that has to do with the different types of charts. Okay, so let's say and go back to our visualization. So questions so far, but also, is there anything that you want to look at today? If it's already on the agenda for tomorrow, I'll tell you that. But if there's anything that you thought of a question about that we might want to take a look at.
I had a question just simply out of curiosity. When you talked about testing for all of the browsers that the software is verified to work on, when Chrome throws an update on us, do you ever do any of those browser updates have a risk of changing what the user is experiencing?
We've never seen that happen.
Okay.
We did run into issues with Internet Explorer when it was still supported, where people would have the default like IE 8 when actually the most current was 11. Now, those types of huge gaps would occasionally cause maybe a little glitch in the display, but really functionally, no. It's more common that people will have the more current versions. So that's what we test with, really, is the most current release of each of the browsers.
Okay, thanks.
E8 was an aberration. Okay, somebody else was asking a question that I interrupted, sorry.
Deb, I have a question.
Yes.
Some of the clients that we have in verticals, when they look at reports or visualizations, are there specific ones that they focus on or best practices when they look at what type of visualizations they want to do on a production line versus an aquaculture customer? The adoption, or is there a set of reports that they prefer? What have you seen when we talk about visualizations and the interface with clients and projects?
Really, there are two things that we see. The first is just status, making sure everything is working and up and running. So we just want to see, for instance, in the IT world, we want to see maybe an overview of the resources on the system, how many transactions were being executed, things like that. In the manufacturing world, it is really more status of, again, is everything working? Some metrics are just off and on, make sure everything is on. And when we talk about alerts tomorrow, that's when that becomes very valuable, because if something happens and an alert is triggered, of course, you know it right away, as opposed to just a display where you'll miss it if there's not somebody actually looking at that report or that display at the time something bad happened. For management type reporting, it's kind of the batch information that we were looking at, how many items were produced on a given day. One of the reports actually showed that in a different way. It was maybe this palletizer by product. Nope. It was one that had a couple rows that we didn't really look at. Here we go. So here, quality data by batch, by operator, by product. So it's the same metric. It's the warp average. So if there's a warp, that would be bad. So what we find is there were a lot of warping in these couple of batches, or in this case, operators 1 and 2 seem to have, problems compared to operators 3 and 4. Or by product, juice and seltzer seem to cause the most issues, whereas beer and coffee and wine and tea don't cause issues so much at all. So it's really more the batch type information. I talked to, it's really kind of interesting, a cardboard manufacturer. And one of the metrics that they collected was the speed of the conveyor belt. So you have a stack of just pieces of cardboard, and the conveyor belt fed those pieces of cardboard into the mechanism that folded it. So there was a, what's the word? The cutter, right? The template that cut the cardboard into the correct shape. And the next step was to fold it. So you know how a cardboard box is flat when you get it. So it folds it and glues it. And then at the end, you've got a stack of cut and folded and glued cardboard boxes. So the speed of the conveyor belt is actually very important, because if it's going too slow, you don't have any quality issues, but you're not making as many boxes as you could. If it's going too fast, then you run into quality issues, or the machine gets jammed and then you have to stop. So you either have discard, throwaway boxes because they're no good and they don't pass the quality check, or you have to stop the machine and clear it out and start up again. So that affects production. And what he was looking at, the plant manager, there were 6 different lines. And so he was looking to find out what is the optimum speed for the conveyor belt where it will run for the entire batch and produce all of the boxes with no issues. Remember, if you ran slower, you would still not have a problem, but it might take you an extra 20 minutes to get through that whole batch. So it's really fascinating, and that was a great question. It's fascinating the type of things that people want to look at. Different customers obviously look at different things. We had one customer where they were creating, it was an oven, and if the oven temperature is too hot, it would warp the glass. And it, like, imagine a multi-pane glass, right? So you've got 2 pieces and they're being put together. So if the oven's not hot enough, it doesn't seal, but if it's too hot, it causes warps. So in that case, temperature is really the important thing. We had one customer, and this is another really interesting one, and they found that it was a car manufacturer, and they were painting the doors, right? The different pieces of the car before they were assembled. And they found that on Monday mornings, there was always a higher incidence of defects in the paint, where they had to basically clean it and repaint it. So of course, that was very time consuming and expensive. So what they did is they compared each day. Basically, they took each metric about the paint guns, about the environment in the room, and compared it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And what they found is that the fan on Monday morning, because they didn't work over the weekend, on Monday morning, the fan kicked in to air condition the room, and all of the dust on the floor was thrown up into the air. And it was that dust that was causing problems with the paint. So instead, they could turn the fan on Sunday night so that they didn't have that issue happening for the first couple of hours on Monday morning when they started their painting operation again. So it's interesting that you can find a variable that seemingly has nothing to do with the process, but is still impacting quality. So other times it's just monitoring to make sure that during the process, everything is working the way it should. So a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that's as interesting to you as it is to me.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I also wanted to ask you the importance of the alerts in this type of platform becomes, in many cases, through visualizations, the centerpiece for our clients to know when they change in manufacturing, for example, from making bread to making donuts.
Mm-hmm.
Some companies call that center lining, making sure that the boiler temperature is within specs going from bread to donuts, that the speed by which the mixer is operating, etc. all of that impacts, and I don't want to get ahead of tomorrow, impacts things like downtime. Can you just tell us a little bit about the importance of visualizations and the alerts that get attached to those when people are monitoring through these? And it's also a two-part question, one for you. And since Adam is one of the partners in automation engineering, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I want to see if he relates to this, since he worked with all these manufacturing companies out there. How does he see visualization as one of those ways of exploring what is going on when data is collected to an analytic platform like this?
Right, Adam, do you want to talk first, or you want me to talk first?
I'll just jump in real quick.
Sure.
Really, the visualization part, I think the key word that Roland used here was data. Because I tell people, yeah, we do smart manufacturing, automation, and things like this, but really everything revolves around the data. So having the ability to use this type of tool for manufacturing, the one that I believe, Roland, we spoke of when we first talked, the one that immediately comes to mind is a packaging company down here in Houston. They don't have anything like this. They're almost stuck in like the Stone Age when you kind of think about it, the type of stuff that they use. So the visualization, I can see them, making leaps and bounds with access to a tool like this. So I definitely see the use cases are just running around in my head a million miles a minute.
If something occurs to you and you want to ask, how we would approach it, feel free to ask those questions.
Definitely.
So tomorrow we'll talk more about the mechanics of the alerts and what we can do with them after they've been triggered, how we can track them, things like that. But the alerts themselves, so why are they important? Well, they're important because that way you don't have to have an operator sitting there watching the visualization all the time, right? It's one thing to create a report of temperature, for instance, and then put a threshold line. If I want the temperature for my bread to be between 240 and 255, or 340 and 355, then I can monitor that metric and just watch it and have my threshold lines on the chart at 340 degrees and 355 degrees. But if I don't have somebody watching, then, if the oven goes crazy, I lose a batch of bread because nobody saw it. So a very simplistic example would be, I can create alerts, and if the temperature goes too high or too low, then I can have an alert triggered. We can do a number of different things with the alerts. We can send an email. It's going to be recorded in the EDM UI, even if I don't send an email. I can send an SNMP trap where it, could go and notify another product or another ticketing system, or I can even trigger a sound file, right? So that it would say, check the temperature, check the temperature, check the temperature, So there are a lot of different things we can do. And what that means is, of course, we don't have to monitor, I've got 6 packaging lines or 10 ovens or, whatever I have in my plant. I don't have to be monitoring them all the time. But then again, the alerts I can also keep track of. And since they're stored within the system, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but because EDM keeps the alerts, they're stored in the admin database. And so we can go back for, maybe the case sealer and go, it seems like we've been having a lot of problems with that piece of equipment. And so I can go in and look over the last day or the last week and see what kind of alerts have been triggered for that piece of equipment or for that system. And so there's a lot of value there, not just right now, but over time. Questions? Well, I actually thought we would go a lot longer today, but first of all, we took a shorter lunch. But do me a favor and think this afternoon about anything that you might want to review. So we'll have a quick review in the morning, and then we'll get into the analysis features. We have alerts, correlation, and forecasting that we want to look at. And then I want to take just a real quick look at the infrastructure of EDM underneath it. And that's more for our technical guys, but always helpful to see that. And then answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so I will see you. Deb, questions?
No, just thank you so much. This is terrific.
You're welcome. Very welcome. It's good that you were able to attend. So I will talk to you guys all tomorrow at 9:30. And feel free, yes, to email us. If you look at the invite, Zach is on our support team, but he's also really good with EDM functionality. And like he told you, he's one of our business analysts. And you can email our support team as well. If you can't remember any of our names, and we'll answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Deb.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and I'll talk to you at the same time tomorrow morning.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you, Deb.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Deb. Bye-bye.
Thank you.